Dragon Age The Veilguard came and went, and it's unquestionable at this point that the game was such a huge disaster for BioWare. And this kind of caught a lot of people off guard, myself included, because I thought even though the game was probably not going to do as well as some of the previous entries in the Dragon Age franchise, I thought it was still going to at least do somewhat of a profit because it's a long established franchise with a huge fan base. So even though there's a lot of stuff in it that was off-putting to audiences in the lead up to the release of it, I thought it was still going to sell way more than what it did. But come to find out, no, people are just so over a lot of this DEI stuff being shoved in their games that even a really popular franchise like Dragon Age can still fail. This is something that I think should be obvious to everyone at this point. Some game studios have kind of picked up on that and have since fired a lot of the activists working at them or shifted their course on their insistence on pushing a DEI agenda in their game. But there's some people out there that are true believers in the cause and will refuse to blame anyone or refuse to blame themselves and would rather just blame everyone else for why their game failed. That's kind of what we're getting at with the subject of today's video, talking about this article from Nat Park Place. Dragon Age actor blames fans for Veilguard backlash, claims people just wanted to see BioWare fail. And let me just point out there, I mean, this is just the voice actor. It's not like they have a lot of creative say-so in it, but for a company to hire someone like this, it suggests that this is more the company culture, whereas they'll just rather blame other people for what's going wrong with their game as opposed to accept any responsibility for themselves. The Dragon Age actress is blaming fans for the backlash against the Veilguard. In the wake of Dragon Age The Veilguard's disastrous reception, one of the franchise's most recognizable voices is pointing fingers not at the game's director, story, or development teams, but at the very fans who once held BioWare in high regards. Alex Wilton Reagan, best known for voicing the female Inquisitor in Dragon Age Inquisition and returning in The Veilguard, has weighed in on the fallout surrounding the title's lukewarm performance. Speaking to IGN, Reagan said she was absolutely devastated by the reception and claimed the Dragon Age The Veilguard backlash was driven by people who just wanted to see BioWare fail. Now, I don't think it's people who just wanted to see BioWare fail, or at least not particularly. I think it is a lot of people who wanted to see a game that's pushing an agenda that they disagree with to fail. And that's not to say that you can't have any type of messaging in your games whatsoever, because a lot of games, I mean, even previous Dragon Age games, have had stuff that can be considered political messaging in it. The only difference, though, is they handled it a little bit more subtly. It didn't seem like the game, like what we saw with some of the clips going around for Dragon Age The Veilguard, where everything would just kind of stop dead in its tracks so that the writer could essentially just kind of, I don't know, preach to the audience for a little bit before you get back to the gameplay. I mean, that's something that's off-putting to a lot of people, especially in a fantasy RPG game like this, where people want to play it for escapism. They don't want to play it to be reminded of the current day political climate. And if you're asking people just to kind of sit through your TED Talk instead of playing the game that they wanted to play, well, I think that's asking a lot of audiences. And if audiences are saying like, no, we don't want to do that, well, then that's on the game and the people who produce that game for failing, as opposed to giving the audience what they want, because realistically, that's what you're supposed to do as a company, is give the people what they want. And if they don't like it, well, then that's on you. And if they've kind of changed their tone on like, okay, we accept this in the past, we don't accept this now, well, then that's still up to the game in order to try to change that to appease the current day audience, as opposed to just insisting like, no, you like this in the past, so we're going to give it to you again. And it's like, no, that's not really a good excuse for this sort of thing. Like, people might have been more accepting in the past, but things have changed. So you either need to change with them or you're going to be left behind, which is what we saw when it came to this particular title. I feel absolutely devastated for BioWare as a studio. They got such mixed reactions to the game. Actually, I want to say it was even mixed reactions. It was overwhelmingly negative reactions, unless you count critics that were generally positive. But even then, a lot of them still couldn't help but point out, it's like, yeah, the messaging in this game was still pretty heavy-handed, and it might be off-putting to a lot of people who aren't just devout followers of such an ideology. I personally thought it was a really strong game. I thought it was just BioWare being more BioWare. And yeah, like I said, to some respects, that might be the case, but audiences are not willing to put up with what they're pushing anymore. So you need to get on board with that, or you're going to find that a lot of people are going to reject your new games. According to Reagan, the backlash wasn't due to questionable creative choices or the tonal departure from past Dragon Age titles, but rather due to really bad people on the internet. And that's another thing to take into consideration. Even people who were like this game will still admit that it was different than previous Dragon Age games as far as tone and other things like that. And that's something that maybe people who are fans of previous Dragon Age games didn't really get on board with. So there's a lot of other legitimate reasons why people did not like this game outside of a lot of the messaging being shoved in it. One of the things that I've talked about in the past when it comes to companies pushing a DEI agenda is not necessarily having those elements included in their games makes it automatically bad. What makes it bad is when a company prioritizes that above all else, and that includes is hiring people at the company. If you're going to hire people based off of their ideology and their identity versus hiring the best people for the job, then you're not necessarily going to get the best people for the job working at your company. And as a result, you're going to have a lot of other things suffer, coming down to even some of the technical aspects like the animation, UI interface, the writing, just various aspects of the game development, all the stuff that doesn't necessarily focus solely on a political agenda. That's going to suffer because the people that you hired for the job are basically the best people who checked off the right boxes versus the best people for the job. That characterization of the criticism, however, runs counter to the actual feedback players have provided since launch. While critics largely gave the game favorable reviews, fans rejected Veilguard's shift in tone, inconsistent character design, and the overt prioritization of ideological messaging over meaningful world building or storytelling. Steam currently lists the game with a mixed user ratings, with tags highlighting orientation and politics as recurring themes in the reviews. Now, I think that might just be people zoning in on some of the more obvious aspects as to why the game failed or why they don't like the game. But like this already said, though, there's other reasons why people are pointing out that the game was so bad. And I think it is a mix of people just don't like being preached to by an ideology that they disagree with fundamentally. And also when you hire people based off of ideology, you're going to have a lot of other issues with the game that don't necessarily coincide with that ideology. Like this pointed out, just like the change in tone and just lazy world building and bad writing and other things of that nature. Reagan went on to denounce early criticism of the game, labeling it as premature and baseless. People were attacking the game before it was released, she said. It's ridiculous. How can you judge a game, a book, a film, a TV show before it's actually released? You can't. It's an idiotic stance to take. But many fans argue that they were reacting to marketing material and developer interviews that telegraphed the game's priorities from the outset, including the now infamous announcement of a genderless party member and a player option to choose a new gender identity mid-game, not to mention the ability to add surgical scars on the chest in the character creator. Yeah, you got to think about that for a second when it comes to the promotional aspects of a game. That's basically the studio trying to put their best foot forward with as much polish as possible. They're presenting this to the public. This is what they want to present to the public, saying like, this is our game. What do you think of it? And a lot of people were looking at what they were offering and saying, I don't like that. I think that looks terrible. I do not want to play that. The other games look better than this. Why are you making a game like this? So if you're going to kind of say like, I don't want to play that game before it came out because you didn't like how they were marketing it, well, then again, that's kind of on the studio. Maybe some people could just be like, well, that looks terrible, but I'm willing to give it a shot. But I don't think it's up to the audience, or I don't think the audience owes that to any developer out there, whether it's for a game, movie, TV show. I think it's up to the developer to try to persuade people in order to consume their product. And if they're not able to do that, well, then again, that's on them. It's not up to the audience in order to give them the benefit of the doubt. I think that's being overly generous if they do. Now, there's times where I've seen like gameplay or trailers for movies or anything like that in the lead up to the release of something that I thought looked bad, and I come to find out it was actually good. And then there's also the vice versa. So you never just know. And yes, you can't necessarily judge a book by its cover, but I'm not blaming anyone for doing that. These announcements weren't made quietly, but were front and center in pre-release press cycles, inviting scrutiny from longtime BioWare followers who felt the game was prioritizing modern identity themes at the expense of narrative depth. And that's 100% what they were doing when it came to this game. So it come to find out like all the stuff that people feared about this game in the lead up to the release of it were later shown to be 100% true. And a lot of that also has to deal with the fact that people were looking at the behind the scenes aspect of it and seeing that the director of the game was also a trans person, and they see these elements in it. Then you start getting the clips from the game when the game finally did release, and people were thinking like, okay, yes, this looks terrible. It's just the director of the game just inserting their own personal agenda in it, taking moments in order to lecture the audience. All this kind of adds up to people not wanting to play this game. And it's not the audience's fault. It's basically the game not giving people what they want. Just think of it like this. If you go to a steakhouse and you say, I want a steak, and then the server gives you a salad, you're not wrong for saying, I don't want this salad. I wanted a steak. And if they get mad and be like, well, you need to just eat this because this is what we gave you. It's like, well, no, it's the fault of the restaurant at that point. It's not the fault of the customer. And if the customer is being like, well, then fine, I'll just go somewhere else and never come back here again. Well, then that's on the restaurant as well. No one owes anyone any business. It's up to that business in order to try to earn other people's business. And it seems they failed to do that when it came to Dragon Age The Veilguard. And as long as they keep doubling and tripling down on this rhetoric that caused people to leave them to begin with, then we're just going to get more of the same. Let's see if they change their course on future releases, or if they're going to continue going down this line and eventually be like some of those other game studios that have been pushing this sort of agenda and refusing to change, and that they've been laying off a lot of these activists working at the company and eventually went under themselves. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share this video out there because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.